Hello and welcome to another edition of Las Vegas Pitch Presents. I'm here with Joe Caldera, Caldera Wealth Management. And Joe, you have like every letter behind your name. You've been doing this so many years and are so good at what you do. How did you actually get into the financial planning aspect of the business?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm super excited to kind of share. It started when I thought my road was to the FBI.
Really?
And so, yeah.
The FBI,
and
okay.
I was going to school full time, working full time, studying full time. I saved up money, and my best friend's mom says, "You need to invest that money." And I was like, "Well, what is that?" And then I learned the rule of 72, where money doubles. And I was like, "This is the best kept secret."
Right.
And so I got the hook, and I said, I need to tell everybody.
Yeah. And you've loved it. I know that we've done a lot of work together in the past, and I've seen what you do with your clients and help them really get to the level where they need to be. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about one aspect of the real estate market that's really a difficult time for many people, and that is divorce. And I know you have some statistics that just came out. Talk about this statistics that came out about Nevada itself and why it's so important to really plan for the divorce and housing after divorce.
Yeah, well, Nevada's known for, fast weddings, right? And so we have about 70,000 people that came to Nevada to tie the knot. But unfortunately,
with Elvis, right?
With Elvis, yeah.
Yes.
But there was Forbes just did the report suggesting that Nevada is the highest ranked divorce in the entire country. And so it comes out to be about a little over 13,000 divorces
13,000
in 2023.
Right. And why is it important when someone is going through that to really have somebody guide them into a situation where both of them, because housing's a big thing. Certainly I'm in the housing market with mortgage and all that. And why is it so important to get them settled so that they can move forward with their life?
The house could be their largest asset. And so when you work with a financial advisor who understands all the complications of separation, right? There are so many missteps, if you will, when couples try to settle their assets. So for instance, a spouse may want to take possession of the home, but yet can't afford to keep it. And so when you work like a professional like myself, a certified financial planner I've been doing this for 25 years, I've been around the block, and it's helpful just to grab the information. We're not negotiating per se, but let's kind of quantify it. Let's look at all the assets, let's look at all the debt, let's look at income, and then when we come together, what's important to each couple.
Right.
One side may say, this asset's important to me, where the other may say this is important to me, and then hopefully, if we can come to an amicable agreement, we take the work that I do to an attorney who then can divorce amicably.
So are you someone that they would go to prior to going and starting the procedure of divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know anybody who is considering or has already thought, hey, this is not going to work,
right.
Seek a financial advisor who specializes in divorce, who can basically help bring down the cost of divorce, because it could, in the state of Nevada, the cost on average is about $7,500, and that's not that could be a lot to some people and not to a lot of others. But if you can divorce amicably, you can get that cost down to half of that. And a contested divorce can range anywhere between $10,000 all the way up to $40,000.
Yeah, and emotions run wild. I unfortunately have gone through that before, and can be super costly and very emotional. And how do you kind of take the emotions out of that to help a couple with their situation?
I don't think you can. There's no doubt that one party may just be hurt, and there's going to be a lot of hurt in that process, and you have to be sensible. You have to be sensitive,
Right.
And empathetic, to the situation. At the same time, we want to move forward, and so if the goal is that both couples have agreed to separate, they've done their therapy, they're like, unfortunately, this is not where we wanted to go.
Right.
It's gathering the data. So my role is to help them with organizing all of the finances. And so we have tools, technology that is able to put this data into a way where we could present to their mediator, attorney, who would then draft up the decree and then present to the judge, who ultimately has the final decision on that. So I'm not an attorney, and I won't give legal advice, but from a financial planning standpoint, it's important to know, what is this asset going to do for you? Does it make sense? Not all assets are created equal, for instance.
Right.
If you look at like retirement accounts, a Roth IRA versus a traditional 401k is not the same, even though the balance may be the same, right?
Right.
We forget that life insurance can play an important role if your spouse dies premature, or your ex-spouse dies prematurely, and there was some liability, whether it's child support or some form of what's the word I'm looking for? Child support and
Spousal support.
spousal support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could cease, and so you want to be able to protect that. That cash flow. Yeah.
So you really try and set them up from a long-term standpoint where both parties are essentially understand it may not be ideal for either one of them, but at the same time, just trying to make it as fair as possible so that they can, go on with their life and move forward.
And oftentimes they're going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to say, okay, or see the assets in front of them, and they would then help say, okay, well, I want this, I want that. The important part is after the divorce, which often happens where both couples come to see me separately to then say, okay, what's the next step? Like, how do I make this work? How's my life going to change? And how does this cash flow work? And if there's debt, how are we going to pay down debt? So it really is not a science, but really it's an art in which bringing these couples to just to a point where we can get them over the finish line.
Yep.
And they can still have their peace, financial peace.
And you really try and do it without them having to go through a contested divorce, right? Where I know you were talking about a situation, somebody was fighting over a washer and dryer, right? That cost maybe $1,000,
Right.
But to go actually contest that was how much?
$4,000.
$4,000.
Yes.
To pound their chest and say, I won, right?
And that's just it, with, battle of, custody of kids and visitations. And so having a good mediator would be important to kind of walk through those sort of things. And there's a sort of this balance
Right.
on both sides.
And then at the end of the day, it's the big part that I see in my business is really the housing. How does the housing set up after a divorce? You talked about a spouse wanting to stay in the house. Potentially that's an option, and potentially it's not an option. Sometimes it's best to sell it, but trying to get them set up and understand what they might be able to qualify for is where you come in as well, correct?
Yeah, so it's hard because you can't, if your divorce is not final and the spouse wants to purchase something, well then we have to have some form of cooperation from the other spouse because they would have to sign off because it's still debt as married couple, right? So sometimes it may be best, to have have a rental of some sort just so that you get out, things have settled,
Right.
And divorce could last a long time too, especially if it's contested, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it can go on a whole year.
Or more.
Or more. Okay.
Yes.
If it's uncontested, it can actually be less than a month.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes talk a little bit about a lump sum settlement versus spousal support and how that can impact somebody.
Well, it all depends on where we're at in this current market. So if interest rates are high, that influences certain outcomes. If inflation is high, that also has an impact. So cash today, depending on how it's managed, is it invested or is it parked, right? That could have a long implication of what that asset does. If you have property, that too can appreciate or depreciate just depending on the economic situation, right? So there's many different factors, but you have to sort of take in consideration where are we at in the economy today? What does it look like in the future? If we were to have recession, how does that impact some of these assets?
So what we find sometimes is that a spouse will sometimes accept a lump sum, and then with that lump sum, they don't have necessarily a monthly income to qualify for a home. So if they're staying in the house and they're taking over the house, lump sum I think could be a very good option. What do you think about the getting spousal support and some lump sum, kind of splitting it up?
Well, for that spouse who has unequal income, that's part of the negotiation. So sometimes assets can help compensate for that liability, for instance. So every couple's different, every situation's different, and they're never the same, which makes my job great because, I come to work and my whole team knows it's like every day is a different day. We just, because we're so unique people. And so it may be best that someone has a lump sum and some spousal support for a certain period of time, depending on how long they were married, right? And if there's kids involved, that plays a role. But there was a rule that just changed in 2019, where now spousal support is no longer tax deductible. So the receiving spouse no longer has to pay tax on that. So that that plays a role now into part of the negotiations.
Makes a big difference. The thing that I love about you, Joe, is that you have just this calm demeanor to be able to really try and make a difficult situation way more understandable and try and take the emotion out and just the facts, right? Here's what we have, here's where we're going. And I think that your demeanor really makes you wonderful to work with individuals that may be going through this difficult time.
It's interesting you say that because I would say I am more empathetic because we're all human, and there's that. I had a couple that just went through divorce, and they're both clients, and unfortunately there was infidelity, which 70% of divorce happens from women. Women are the ones who are filing divorce 70% of the time.
70%, okay.
And she was angry. I mean, I let her just spew out whatever she wanted to say because she just needed to let it out. And you just have to give them that space, just to say it's okay.
So listening is...
It's listening. Well, part of it is listening, but it's also realizing that, you're hurt. You're very much hurt. And it's not fun. It's not fun in any little thing. And so if I could help aid, there's a lot of things I can't say, I can't share. Anything that a client speaks to me in my private office stays in that office, So there is these firewalls that you cannot go through, and so sometimes it's difficult because I can see the other side, and you have to be professional about it all.
So do you work primarily with clients and trying to help both of them understand, or would you represent one that's moving on to their life and maybe the other one is working with somebody else?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a mediator, you represent both, right? So conversations don't happen separately. They happen together. So sometimes I might get an email, in that email I can't respond per se. I has to be respond in a joint.
Everybody
in a joint capacity if I'm acting as the mediator. And so because we don't want any secrets, this is, I don't represent one party or the other. Now, they may want to come to me separate, and in which case then that's going to be defined. This client is going to be my client, and that other person I would not represent.
Right.
And so I would have and these are all part of our agreements. And confidentiality is also very important. So it depends on how the couple wants to be, how they want to treat the situation. So sometimes they're married, already in our wealth management offering, then they file divorce, then they want me to help mediate their situation, their finances. And since we already have a lot of the data, it's easy for us to talk about,
Right.
what do they each want to, how do they want to separate this?
Got it. How would somebody get started? Let's say they're thinking about, unfortunately splitting up. Where would you recommend they go to get started? And what's the first call? What's the kind of like that process?
Yeah. So typically it's one of the spouses calls and says, hey, we're considering this. And then what I would do is confirm with the other spouse if they too want to participate. And so once they both agree, we schedule a meeting where we have the initial conversation either through Zoom or live in my office or over the phone. And I walk them through the process of what it looks like so that they have a genuine sense of the timing of things and what my role is specifically for them, and then what's the hope or the outcome at the end of all this. And so
So you guide them through that process so that they understand what it is and maybe start to feel a little bit more comfortable with here's where we're at and here's where we're going to be.
Yeah.
If they're not clients of yours, you still definitely help them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of easier that way if they're not clients, right? Because
Because you know a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they're new clients, it's great. I don't have any biases per se, right? Not that I have any biases, but it's I love all my clients. So my bias is that I love them all.
Right.
And so yeah.
Good comment right there. Yeah. So last words, Joe. If somebody is actually going through this or thinking about going through it, what would be the first step? What would you recommend they do?
Call our office, 616-2000, area code 702. And 616-2000 is our number. You can just give our office a call. You can visit my website at calderawealth.com. On the top right, there's a schedule an appointment. You can go ahead and just schedule a free consultation, 15 minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay.
And that gets things started.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining us today on Las Vegas Pitch Presents. We appreciate all your insight, and we'll see you next time on Las Vegas Pitch. Bye, everybody.
Sounds good.